I hope you're doing well. Let's talk about this compound called water. You've perhaps heard that water is life. Okay, so water is life, yes, and that is something that we are really going to concentrate on. Why do we think that water is very important in our lives? And how do we make sure that we actually have this safe water for use at home, in agriculture, and also in industries? What are the things that we ought to do? Okay, but first of all, where do we get that water from? That's something also that we really need to look at. But generally, yes, water is life, and it constitutes a large proportion of our body. Actually, our body is made up of water. Okay, our blood has the water. Okay, you sweat water. A lot of enzymatic activities or biological processes that take place in the body occur when there is water. And water is also, by the way, a byproduct of some of these metabolic processes. So even in our lives, water is very, very important. And actually, it is very easy to have someone actually dying because of lack of water, that is dehydration, compared it to someone dying when they have not taken food. Okay, dehydration kills very fast compared to hunger. Okay, so when you lose a sizable percentage of your body water, then it's problematic. Okay, you need to be rehydrated. So rehydration becomes very important, and that's why we are emphasizing that regardless of the organism you're talking about, water is very important, whether it is humans, whether it is plants, whether it is microorganisms. It is essential for all forms of life. Okay, so it also forms a significant proportion of the Earth's surface. This is basically to say that a sizable proportion of the Earth's surface is covered actually by water. Yet, we have some countries that are having issues to do with access to clean water. Okay, so that means that there is something wrong somewhere. Access to clean and safe water is a major problem. Okay, and yet a sizable percentage of the Earth's surface is actually covered by water. Okay, so what is the problem there? But in chemistry, of course, when talking about any compound, we are interested in its chemical formula, what makes it up. So from that chemical formula of water, you can see that water is made up of hydrogen and oxygen. We actually say that water is a molecular compound. Okay, this is to say you have water existing as water molecules that are attracted to one another. Okay, through hydrogen bonds and dipole interactions. Okay, so water is quite unique. It can exist in all the three states of matter. It can be a solid as ice, it can freeze and form a solid which is ice, or when you actually melt the ice you get a liquid that can easily flow. So you have it as dew, mist and rain, that is liquid. Okay, and then you have gaseous water vapor. Okay, that is actually water that we are talking about, that is in gaseous form. Okay, so where do we get this water from? Of course, we can harvest water from rain. Okay, so rainwater is quite safe to drink, but one disadvantage is that it has low mineral concentration. Okay, so that means that may not be good for your body, because you want water that has some minerals for your body. Okay, but it is definitely good for washing clothes. Why? Because it easily forms lather. The rainwater is not hard water a concept that we shall look at later. That means that you can use rainwater for washing clothes. You know of boreholes, you know of wells and springs. This water actually is obtained from underground. So we say that is underground water. Okay, it's often clean and also contains some dissolved minerals, which we actually need for the strength of our bones and teeth. Okay, and then we have what we call surface water. The rivers, the lakes, and oceans can fall under this category. But the challenge is some of these water bodies are actually contaminated with solids, dissolved minerals, and pollutants. So you can have surface water and it is readily available, but you can't really use it because it is contaminated. Unusable water, you can say it is unsafe water for drinking. And then we have water that is trapped in ice. Okay, so when the ice is being formed as a very huge mass or solid, you will have water trapped in there. Okay, but when the temperatures actually increase, this ice can actually melt and you have an increase in water flow. Okay, so the largest percentage in terms of water that is available to us, humans, much of that water is actually salty. So 97% of Earth's water is actually salty. Okay, that means that you don't have this water in a form that is easily used, because you need water that is not too salty for drinking, but also not one that is hard water. Okay, because it is the salts that make water to be hard. Hard water is that cannot easily form like with our ordinary soaps. Okay, and then we have what we call fresh water. Fresh water, let's just take it to be water that is actually not salty, and is the one that forms 3%. The challenge is that it is not easily accessible. That means that you have individuals or populations who don't have access to it because it is having issues to do with access in terms of distance. And then ice, much of the fresh water is actually held up in ice, 87%. And then 12% is groundwater, and then you have the 1% is in lakes. So we have lakes that are having fresh water, that is water that does not have salt, and you can easily use them for different purposes at home or even industries. But unfortunately, much of this, the access is also an issue. Okay? Yes. So sometimes with this water can be polluted, and most of the pollutants are coming from the agricultural and the industrial activities of man. Okay, so what the agricultural activities like farmyard manure, when they get, or even the pesticides or even the fertilizers, when they get into the water body actually becomes contaminated. And these fertilizers contain some of the compounds that we are seeing here, sulfates, ammonia, and many others. So these actually contaminate the water bodies. But naturally, we have water bodies or water that has minerals, and we actually need these minerals. So sodium chloride, calcium sulfate, magnesium sulfate, calcium hydrogen carbonate, and magnesium hydrogen carbonate. These are minerals that you can easily find in water, in natural settings, in natural water. Okay, and remember that water that contains minerals is also good for humans because of bone health, teeth health, and many other physiological processes that require these minerals. So this is not to say that the minerals are always bad, but we also have those calcium salts and magnesium salts that actually contribute to hardness of water, as we shall see in our subsequent sessions. So we use the water for different purposes. At home, we use water for cooking, washing clothes. We use it for irrigating our vegetables around. Even in the garden, we use them for irrigation. Use the water for irrigation. And then in industries, sodas or even drinks are made using water. But also water is an important element in hydro transport, or transportation happens over water, right? Using the boats, marines and ships and things like that. And you also use water to make different products. I've already mentioned the soda and other drinks that use water, but also the manufacturing of other chemical compounds requires water. Water is life, and some organisms actually live in water. We actually call them aquatic organisms. Okay, so that means that water is actually a habitat and supports many organisms, and that's a concept to do with biodiversity. So that means that if we don't regulate or we don't conserve our environment, then we are going to have problems to do with the climate. Okay, as we shall see, the water cycle is very important to maintain. If you don't practice activities such as afforestation, activities such as recycling of the water, you will have problems happening. For example, if you dig with deforestation, you have reduced amounts of rain. You basically have desertification, and that means that you have issues to do with access to water. So the water cycle is here. It deals with how water continuously moves on the Earth's surface. Okay, we have water that basically starts. If we assume you take this as our starting point, you have rain. This rain can of course the water that comes can land on a water body. So that means that you have water being collected into a water body, or you have this rain that is on land that also will end up, some of it will also end up in the water body. You also have rain that also happens in mountainous areas. Also, this water finds its way to the water body. Okay, but also that is not to say that you don't have water that would seep into the ground, into the rocks in the ground. Okay, so there are many processes that are illustrated in this diagram. One of it, of course, that rainfall, which we have highlighted, the formation of clouds. Rain comes from clouds, nimbus clouds, and the rain coming down, and also sometimes the snow. That's what we actually call precipitation. Okay, we have precipitation happening when you have rainwater. You have snow when they're falling to the ground. That is what we call precipitation. Okay, so this is one process that we can look at here. But also from this, when you have the sun, which is illustrated here, when the sun hits the water body, hits the ground, hits the plants and other man-made environments, this will drive the water to evaporate. So you have an issue to do with evaporation. Okay, you have evaporation happening. This means that you will have water vapor moving upwards. Okay, that is what we call evaporation. So those are some of the processes that happen. Let's look at them in detail one by one. Evaporation, I've explained it. You have water moving into vapor form. So you have liquid water that turns into vapor form. this is what we call evaporation. The evaporation can happen from a number of surfaces. It can be from plants, it can be from water bodies, it can be from the ground. You will have water turning into vapor. That is evaporation. Okay, and then we have transpiration. You also still have this water vapor being emitted by plants into the air through the tiny pores called the stomata. Okay, you also have another process here called condensation. So when the water vapor moves up, it cools down. Okay, it cools. This is to mean that it loses heat, and then it condenses into tiny droplets that we actually call the clouds. And then it is these clouds that become very heavy and fall on Earth as rain, snow, sleet, and hail, the one I called precipitation. So precipitation includes all these that I've just mentioned: the rain, snow, sleet, and then that is sleet, and then hail. You have heard of hailstones, right? Yeah, these are the things that we're talking about. And then all this water that is actually falling will finally also collect into water bodies, and some of it will go underground to form what we term as underground water. Okay, but still also this that collects into the water bodies can also evaporate, and then the cycle also starts afresh. Okay, and then the runoff, the water or the rainwater that happens in the mountains or on land will also eventually end up in the same water bodies. Could be rivers, could be oceans, it could be lakes. That's what we are emphasizing there. And then you have some of the precipitation soaks into the ground and replenishing the underground water that we have already talked about. So sometimes we do things, humans are involved in activities that actually cause contamination of this water. And this is the concept of pollution. Okay, the addition of harmful substances into water bodies is what we call pollution. This has an impact on organisms that stay in water, the ones we call aquatic organisms. Or here we can say that the aquatic ecosystem is actually being affected. But also humans are affected by this. If you have people drinking water that is not safe, that is contaminated, they will get diseases such as cholera and others. Okay, so you don't want to drink unsafe water. You don't want to get typhoid. You don't want to get all these communicable diseases. Okay, so that means that we need to be careful with how we handle wastes from industries, from hospitals, from our homes, and also from our agricultural farms. Having proper sewage systems to carry this human waste is very important. And maybe recycling these wastes is something that we really need to look at. Okay, one of the disadvantages of having a lot of pollutants, even in the atmosphere, is that you will have these gases, for example, carbon dioxide, nitrogen dioxide, and sulfur dioxide, really combining together with water vapor. This will actually cause issues to do with road transport, especially if there is a reduced visibility. This is to say that when we have a lot of smokes from industries, this smoke can actually make it very difficult for you to see while driving, and that will easily lead to accidents. So reduced visibility, you can't see properly because of all these pollutants in the air can result into accidents. But additionally, these gases, these actually are acidic gases, sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide, nitrogen dioxide. These gases can actually combine and form what we call acidic rain. So when you have acidic rain, the problem here is that the acidic rain actually affects a lot of organisms, including the plants. The plants, if we have air that is contaminated, and then you have this acidic rain happening, the process of photosynthesis is going to be affected. And we know that plants are actually what we call primary producers. They're the ones that make food that other organisms depend on. So you don't want to have an environment where you have acidic rain happening. This is still to emphasize that we need to protect the environment to make sure that these gases are not produced in huge amounts to affect the atmosphere and causing what we call acidic rains. Of course, acidic rains also have a lot of other impacts that I have not mentioned. It is not rain that you would wish to have. Okay, it could destroy buildings. This is what we are emphasizing here. It could destroy plants. That's what I've talked about in terms of photosynthesis. If photosynthesis is reduced in plants, animals will also be affected. It is a vicious cycle. So that means that we need to take care of the environment, even take care of the water that we actually use in our homes. At a large scale, treatment of water becomes one of the key things that urban authorities need to embark on. Treatment of water means that you are going to reuse water, recycling the water. Okay, water from sewage systems, water that is coming from industries can be treated and then again sent back to people to use again. So that is a sustainable way of doing things. But that process involves first filtration, where you move suspended solids from this water. The next stage is what we call sedimentation, is allowing some particles to settle such that you can easily deal with the water that is on top. And then the other impurities, the other suspensions settle down, particles settle down. And then the next step thereafter is what we call coagulation and flocculation. These ones, you're interested, still you have particles remaining, but you're interested in clumping these particles together such that you can actually separate them from the water. And then you can also move to the next stage of disinfection, where you can add chlorine to the process called chlorination, or even add what we call ozone. Still, ozonation and chlorination are very important in killing microbes. Okay, that is very important there. So it is our role to make sure that we use water sustainably, we harvest the water, we recycle the water, and also make sure that the wetlands are maintained, because wetlands are good catchment areas for this water that we use. Okay, so those are the things that we need to do. Afforestation is also among one of the things that we really need to do in order to conserve the water that we have. Thank you for listening to this presentation where we are focused on water. Water is life. It's very important that we conserve it using all means within our hands or within our reach. Thank you.